Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dixon, and today I've got Josh Kanter on the podcast. He is the founder and CEO of a company called Leaf Planner. Very interesting episode. We talk about his kind of multiple careers that he's had before actually starting Leaf Planner, which helps generational wealth families with some financial education and essentially having a one-stop shop for all of the necessary information that needs to be passed on from generation to generation. Josh started his career as a corporate lawyer, did a stint in doing some VC investing and worked for his dad and brother's venture capital firm before moving into working with family offices and then starting Leaf Planner in his 60s. So very interesting episode about kind of how his journey kind of led him into being an entrepreneur and being a founder. Digging really about how that journey has kind of taken shape. So really fascinating episode. Let's get Josh on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. All right, Josh, thank you for being on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Justin. I'm excited to be here and for this conversation.
Awesome. Well, let's get the audience up to speed on what you're up to. So if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of an introduction on who you are, where you are, and what you're up to.
Sure. So currently, I guess I'm an entrepreneur and have started a software company about 3 years ago. But my journey to that, which hopefully we'll talk about a little bit, but started as a lawyer in Chicago long time ago, as you can tell from the hair color. Ended up coming into the family office space as a result of some really complicated multi-generational family issues and my father's death about 22 years ago. And then really kind of dug into helping families of wealth think about issues around multi-generational wealth and legacy and philosophy around values and those kinds of issues, and all of which led to the creation of this company, Leaf Planner, that I'm currently spending most of my time as a 62-year-old entrepreneur.
That's awesome. How long ago did you start Leaf Planner?
Leaf Planner started, I guess conceptually, its roots go back to our family story, 22 years ago. But as a company, we really just started storyboarding the idea for it in 2021, and it's been live since 2022. So we're really just at 3 years of being live as a little baby company.
That's awesome. So before we unpack some of your earlier career, I'm kind of curious, maybe share a little about what Leaf Planner is, and then, we can dig into a little bit of how we got there.
Yeah. So Leaf Planner, as I said, it's a software platform. It's basically this idea of, and it sort of goes back to my story, so I'll try not to do that, but it really relates to this idea that families are complicated. And, to some extent, I'll say that's a first world problem and whatever, but families, especially families of wealth, obviously are complicated. And you probably remember the old adage of you get an owner's manual with a toaster, not one with a kid. And when I was kind of entering this part of my career 20 something years ago, my addition to that statement was, well, you don't get one with a family of wealth either. And so ultimately what Leaf Planner is about is building a family owner's manual. It's about how do you capture knowledge and information and relationships that permeate families and complex families in particular. But that could be that, mom has certain information, dad has information, the lawyer has information, the accountant has information, the wealth advisor has information, the property manager, right? It's just this wildly dispersed pieces of information around kind of the whole family ecosystem, if you will. And so Leaf Planner is designed to help families figure out how do we tame that complexity and how do we bring it all into a single place that we can use for education of kids and partners and advisors, that we can use to identify blind spots in our thinking and our planning, that we can use as a life management tool, that we can use for succession of information, sort of on and on.
Interesting. So is it almost like an aggregator of information from, unfortunately, I don't have the family wealth that I can speak to my own experience, but I used to work for a wealth management firm and led recruitment for one, so I have a little bit of understanding of kind of the inner workings of a wealth management shop that does more than just pick some stocks for you. So,
Yeah.
is this platform, if I can use my own dumbing it down for
Mm-hmm.
myself kind of analogy, like all of the people that help support keeping that family wealthy and growing that family's wealth, from, like you said, accountants, CPAs, financial planners, investment professionals, et cetera, et cetera. Is this a place, like a one-stop shop for that family, the members of that family, to go to and gather information if somebody wants to say, hey, what did this part of our wealth do, whether it's real estate or whatever? Like, is it kind of like a place where all of those pieces or all those other systems integrate into one platform?
Yeah, essentially, I'll say yes. I'll be a little cautious as you use the last piece of saying integrate into one platform, because we're just starting to really work on a variety of integrations, for example. But, your experience in the wealth management industry, I'll say, right, you're very used to wealth management firms that are using one form or another of what I would call data aggregation or portfolio reporting, right? That might be Adapar, Black Diamond, Tamarack, Orion, all these different systems that are out there that do that piece of the world. I would almost say Leaf Planner is the equivalent of that. It sits side by side with those things in the sense that it's taking all of the information that those things don't collect and don't look at. And so, you might have in one of those data aggregation or portfolio reporting systems, hey, we've got accounts here, here, and here, and we've got these assets and we've got these private investments and whatever. And those systems are designed to roll up all that hard data, right? That financial data, if you will.
Yep.
Leaf Planner sitting there as a complement to that in the investment particularly piece, to say, okay, but I did this deal with Justin, and why? How do I know Justin? Why did I do this deal with Justin? And do I trust Justin? And would I do the next deal with Justin? And what entity owns that deal with Justin? And where's Justin's phone number? On and on and on, kind of pulling at all those threads in the way that the balance sheet's not going to pull on those threads. And so it's kind of really, I'd say, a complement to exactly what you're describing, to guide families.
Like metadata around like the investments that you're making, and you're kind of pulling in almost like the human aspect of these investments to understand who they're with, why I did them, maybe what was I doing at that point in my life, and then how do I contact that person essentially to say, let's do another deal or whatever.
Yeah. And the only thing I would say is, like, just make sure that as you think about that, and we're talking about this, the idea of that is to go sort of, investments can be a component of that, but this is literally going everywhere to, why is this painting on my wall behind me? It's going to, where does my dog go to the vet? It's going to, if I'm not here and I've had a housekeeper for 25 years, do I want to take care of her, and how would I take care of her and recommend to my kids, that they take care of her? So, like, you're talking about, when you talk about it as metadata around all of these different aspects of a complex life. And that's where I really would say, when I talk about, we've become really complex beings, right? I mean, life is just complex. And you even said, whatever your personal situation is about your wealth level, I'd argue we all just have complex lives. I mean, my kids have.
I was just thinking, like, there's some things that I wish I had a one-stop shop for, remembering who did this for me. And I don't even remember, like, I was telling you my fence blew down when we were waiting to. So I'm like, if I had repaired my fence before, I would call that guy, but maybe I don't have his business card or whatever. So.
Well, that and do you have at your fingertips the insurance policy and the deductible and the premium was due? And by the way, no matter what your worth and my worth and the next person's worth is, guess what? All of us have expiring passports and driver's licenses, and it's all just complex.
Interesting. Could I don't want to go too on a tangent here, but could this platform be suitable for somebody that doesn't have the generational wealth that requires a family office and all of that? Like, I don't know what you charge and how you charge for the platform, if you're able to share, but, like, is this something where somebody like myself who doesn't have, that ultra complex life could actually see benefit of this? Because even I think about, like, having all of the different accounts that my wife and I have, and then the life insurances, and, like, who is the beneficiary? Did we update it? Like, and what are the, what are the things that if I would pass on, maybe my wife would have no idea that we had, this money, and I'm not hiding anything from her, but she may not know how to access it or what the account numbers
Right.
are and all that stuff.
Right.
So yeah, don't go too deep on a tangent, but I'm just curious if you see
Yeah,
applications or
absolutely.
people using it that are not your typical family office person.
Yeah. I mean, my experience, again, obviously for the last 25 years of my life has been in that family office world and the ultra high net worth world. But the reality is Leaf Planner is designed to do exactly what you just described, right? It can help, a couple who just have a lot of moving pieces in their lives. I mean, my
Mm-hmm.
wife probably honestly wouldn't even know how the utility accounts get paid,
Yeah.
let alone is there $1 million of gold in a safe deposit box? So there's not. So going back to your wife as well, right? But really, really helping kind of anybody at any economic level, and the way it's designed. And I mean, it's a little weird to say this literally could help everybody, but at the highest echelon, there's aspects of this that are very value add to a family office. At the lower echelons that we're really talking about in the worlds that we live in, it's very helpful. My wife loves that this thing exists because she
Yeah.
knows that if I get hit by a bus, she is basically up Shit's Creek, right? And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of that, and there are things that she knows that I don't know. So
Right.
there's always a division, again, a division of labor, a division of responsibility, a division of knowledge. And so it's how do you bring that all together and protect everybody? And in my case, at this point in my life, it's most importantly, how do I protect my kids?
Yeah.
Right. It's, so it's definitely designed to be able to help you, me, the $1 billion family office. Our clients are kind of all across the spectrum.
And this isn't some type of a financial planning tool. Is it?
No.
Is it? It's not going to help you map out or plan your investment. It's more of a kind of like we described it, more of a life integrator, so that you can kind of see the things that you need to see that you may not be aware of,
Yeah.
whether it's a
Yeah.
business bank accounts or any kind of like service provider or insurance policies, whatever. It's all housed in one location, so you have
Yeah.
this database of resources that at your
Right.
fingertips.
Yeah. Yeah. So two comments I guess I would make to that. One is that not only is it housed in one location, I sometimes jokingly say, like, if a document management system, a CRM, and a relational database had a baby, that'd be Leaf Planner,
Mm,
because it's also all connected together. So like you talk
yeah.
about your fence that got blown over, right? That fence is connected to that insurance policy, is connected to that insurance agent, is, it's all interconnected. Um, and then from a financial planning standpoint, I would say you're absolutely correct. It is not like, we're not eMoney, we're not Money Guide Pro, we're not any of those systems
Yeah.
that are designed to do what I would call, and I think you from the wealth industry would call, the true financial planning. There is a whole educational component to it. And
Okay.
so a lot of the families that use Leaf Planner, to your point, right, are not yet at that stage of having generational wealth. But, look, if you're 30, 40 years old and you've got $10 million and you start doing the compounding, it ain't hard to figure out that you're going to have generational wealth by the time you're in your 70s, 80s, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
And so a lot of families just don't even know what the questions are. So when you talk about financial planning, it's not financial planning in a true sense, but it might be in there saying to you, hey, Justin, maybe you've got 4 million airline miles. And do you know that the airlines will not respect the inheritability of those airline miles to your wife if you don't specifically mention them in your will? So
Mm,
there's all kinds of those kind of little tidbits. Now, I'm not going to say that's financial planning, but there are planning elements and educational elements around, again, the complexity of our lives, because they're complex. We're chasing credit card points or mileage points, or we have a country club or a vacation club. There's a great example in my little life. We belong to a really high end uh, vacation club, and and when I started putting my own stuff into Leaf Planner, it made me go back and look at our contract with this company, and the contract basically says that my membership is inheritable by my kids if somebody calls the club and tells them that I'm dead within 90 days of my death. Well, I'm kind of hoping my kids are crying for the first 90 days,
right.
right? Not
Not
that
thinking about
they're
going on vacation.
not dialing for vacation. So those kind of things, which again, I would say that's not financial planning, but
Yeah.
it's, I don't know what you call it, but it is preparation and knowledge that is, somebody's going to find that contract 2 years later and say, oh crap, we we screwed the pooch on that, right?
Yeah.
So there's that
Is
element
it
too.
do you have a almost like an AI tool that's scraping the contracts to kind of call out any of the
Not
kind of
yet.
okay.
Yeah, not yet. We're getting closer to it. And obviously, with AI being the buzzword of I jokingly
Right.
say like our AI is we have a concierge team that's
Mm,
real life humans who do help with some of that kind of work and analysis if a client family wants that help. So I say our AI is human
human.
intelligence right
Yeah.
now, but we'll get to a point where, and there's some things this year on the roadmap where you'll be able to like actually query your Leaf plan, like a little private chat bot within your Leaf plan. You'll be able to do some of that document ingestion in a more
Yeah.
efficient way through some AI tools and things like that. But it's a little bit more on our roadmap than it is right now.
I could see that being a massive value add to having, everybody has these contracts and some of them are, legal documents that you signed, that maybe you got from your dad because you're the executor of his estate
Yeah.
once,
Yeah.
but he's still alive. But then it's like, well, it should almost act as like a reminder or like, hey, you did maybe you want to read this section to your point. You've got to call
Yeah.
this thing 90 days after he passes so that you still can access it and all of
Right.
that. So
Right.
interesting. So before we get too deep into the functionality, I'm just curious about you know talking a little bit about your journey, right? You've had seems like a couple careers in your career of being a lawyer, and then getting plugged into the family office space, which I find very
Yeah.
fascinating. How people started family offices. The wealth management firm I worked for was originally a single family office, and then it just grew and grew and grew over the decades into being a mid-size wealth management place. And so maybe talk about kind of your journey from kind of being the lawyer, working with family offices, and then identifying this gap in the
Hmm.
market to then create a company. Because some people have ideas, but they just never take that next step of being like,
Yeah.
this is an idea that I want to pursue. So maybe walk us through your journey a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to. And there are a few threads there I'm going to try to pull on because I really love the way you asked that question. So yes, I mean, I just started as a lawyer. I actually graduated from college in economics and political science and decided I was qualified to say, do you want fries with that? And so I decided to go to law school and ended up going to law school. Was back in Chicago, started as a corporate and securities lawyer. My family actually, not intentionally and just kind of coincidentally, also was in the venture capital business. So we ran a couple of venture funds and my brother and dad were doing that. And so I ended up kind of as outside counsel working for our venture funds and a number of our portfolio companies and stuff like that. And on the corporate side, I think what was interesting about that for me is I now I can look back at it and say this, right? But that one of the things I really enjoyed working with young entrepreneurs, and of course back then I was young too, so working in that kind of environment with these young startup entrepreneurs that we were investing in on the venture side was, first of all, these were all startup companies. We were taking people out of their garages, right? They didn't have a general counsel. They didn't know anything. So as a corporate lawyer, I found that I really loved working alongside that entrepreneur and showing them what their options are and helping them reach the right decision. But of course, in the corporate law space, and remember, I said I was a corporate and securities lawyer. So on the security side, right, you follow the rules, and that's exactly
Right.
what you do. On the corporate side, obviously, it's much more about holistic advice and saying, we're going to find the answer that's right for you, Justin, and your business, right? And I really love that kind of general advisory. It was almost like the old. First of all, it was, I would say, like the old school counselor, and the old school. In Europe, it was the consigliere, and
Mm.
obviously in The Godfather, it was Tom or
Yeah.
whatever his name was, right? And so that went along for a long time. And then, as I said, my dad unexpectedly, always unexpected, he got sick. He got cancer in 2000.
Mm.
Died 18 months later. We knew he was going to die, and so I left my job to come help my family navigate through this wild complexity. My dad was a world famous tax lawyer, and we were filing 750 tax returns a year. We were in a 30-year battle with the Internal Revenue Service that ultimately went up to the U.S. Supreme Court, like frankly, a clusterfuck and a half. So
Wow.
I came in to help manage our way through all of that. So that was like a big pivot. That was not intentional. That was not, we thought my dad would die at his desk at 100, and here he is dying of cancer at 70. And so it was a huge sort of disruption which it
Yeah.
always is, right? Again, it always is. So that's going to lead toward that same path. So that leads me into the family office world. Then about a decade ago, so I guess career number two is the family office world. About a decade ago, I realized the part of that family office world that I liked so much was, again, and it harkened back to that corporate law period of my life of saying, I love giving families advice. I love helping them think through problems, but ultimately coming up with the answer that's right for them, not for me. And so I launched just a small consulting practice to say, hey, I'm happy to help families or family offices with thinking through legacy, thinking through how do I educate my kids, thinking through family meeting facilitation, all of sort of what in the industry, as you know, is kind of somewhat derogatorily sometimes called the soft stuff, right?
Mm.
But I really love that stuff. So I hung my shingle doing that and built kind of a little consulting career out of that, as well as our family office and with my legal background. So that was kind of career number three, I guess. And then Leaf Planner really came and by the way, I will say, and so I said I wanted to pull on a couple of threads. Sorry for the long answer.
No,
I really, I really never considered myself the entrepreneur, and that really, frankly, always bugged me because I grew up in this environment that I saw all these titans of industry who were my dad's friends and clients, and I was like, I want to be that, but I didn't feel like I had the vision or the drive or whatever it is to know how to do that. And so then we moved out to Utah 22 years ago. And when I got here, one of the interesting things was realizing that, I'm from Chicago, like having an impact on a place like Chicago, it's pretty hard.
yeah.
Having an impact on a place like Utah, it's pretty easy. Like you show up with a little bit of time and a little bit of money and an idea, and you can make stuff happen. And so that was really cool. So that was really enlightening to me. And I started a nonprofit here. And it took a while for me to kind of reframe my brain around saying, hey, starting a nonprofit, that's entrepreneurial. Like it doesn't have to be for profit in order to be entrepreneurial, right? So that was kind of my first journey into, I guess, entrepreneurialism, if that's a word. And then Leaf Planner, again, was just this owner's manual concept we had done for our family. And I had done it through my consulting practice with other families. And somebody said to me, this is really cool. Why don't you turn this into a platform and help more families? Because there's nothing really like it in the industry. And that was really kind of that spark for me. But again, I got to say, Justin, like I had a friend at my side who really pushed me because I think I would have said, oh, that's a cute idea. And I would have let it fall by the side of the road. And fortunately for me, because again, I don't think I have that entrepreneurial fire in me. And certainly like I'm 62. Like it's not exactly like I'm doing this at 25 or 30.
Right.
And so having somebody who kind of pushed me to say, you can do this was really cool and kind of gave me that was the substitute fire, I guess I'd say, for a lot of entrepreneurs who have that fire inside of them that I didn't really have. But I wanted to. And so that's my journey into it.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot there to unpack. And I guess, as you were in the family office space and working with these families and almost like doing Leaf Planner 1.0, right? You're kind of like creating it and doing it kind of ad hoc with every family, I would imagine. Maybe not creating a space for all of the information, but at least educating and all of that.
Yeah.
Like, what were some of the ahas during that process where, one family has this problem, that the next family has the same problem or the same gap or the same, what were some of those consistent themes that probably led you to kind of pulling it all together in Leaf Planner from an education and just kind of the one source of truth kind of model?
Yeah. So I think, it's interesting. I mean, it's again, a composite of all these different things. Right. And in my case, if I go back to saying we were filing 750 tax returns a year when my dad died, and all of a sudden I'm realizing I'm going to spend basically a decade of my life taking apart this enterprise structure that he built. But all of a sudden I realized I don't know why he built it that way. Well, to this day, I would say is the smartest person I've ever met on the planet. And so there's a reason, right? He wasn't entity happy. He was doing this for some reason. So when I realized that I didn't understand that context, and by the way, as an aside, what I think is interesting, and this is a typical problem, right? The context of that answer goes back to the tax code of the 1960s and the 1970s. But here I am in the 2000s looking at this saying, I don't know what the tax code said in the 60s and 70s. And so
Yep.
not understanding that historic context was hugely important. Um, I see families who may have collections. So we happen to be art collectors. You can see a piece of art behind me. Um, if you said to most families at the early stage of some of these kind of questions, is your art collection or whatever it is, I don't care. I've got a friend who's got a tractor collection. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, right? Is
Interesting.
it on your homeowner's policy? Do you have a collections policy? Most people aren't going to be able to tell you what the difference between those two things are, and don't even know what the question is to go ask their insurance expert if they have
Mm,
an insurance expert.
right.
So again, a lot of this was like hearing these stories over and over and over again of, we don't know where the information is. It's not being looked at in a holistic way. Different advisors are coming and looking at it with different points of view, which they should. But then how do you bring all of that back together to make the right decision? We don't know what the questions are to ask. And it could be as simple as, we had a client who's called up and said, my daughter was going through O'Hare. She was on her way to an interview. She lost her phone, like everybody of that generation. She's got a whatever you call the sleeve thing on your phone, right? Her credit card, her license,
Oh,
and her
yeah.
phone all gone in one instant, right?
Yep.
And this guy lives between three homes, and he was on the road somewhere and had no way to deliver to his daughter the pieces of information that she would need to go justify to TSA even who the hell she was. So
Right.
with Leaf Planner, she could do that. So anyway, it's that aggregation of stories and compilation of, I'll say, disciplines that you've also seen in the wealth management industry that really try to holistically bring all that information together.
And going back to kind of your time kind of in the VC space, because I interview and talk to a lot of startup founders and private equity and venture capital firms, and that's one of the reasons why I've narrowed my recruiting focus to
Mm-hmm.
supporting the startup and small business community, because I feel like I've worked in big companies, I've worked in startups, on the corporate side, and now I have the opportunity to support them as they are growing, because you have an idea, but then as you grow, you need more people, you need more talent, you need more brain power, and they don't always know what the best ways to find that talent is. And so I'm curious, when you started working with the kind of startup community, how that kind of helped you think about when you were starting Leaf Planner, because now you're in their
Mm-hmm.
shoes, right? You're
Yeah.
the one that's starting the business, and I don't know if you had to raise outside money or whatever, but like, even if you didn't, like, as you're scaling it, going from kind of your ideation and your kind of beta, and then you've got your 2.0 version, and then all that. Did
Yeah.
some of that education and kind of lessons learned rub off back in the day when you were working with those startups to then help you now?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that, some of the lessons are different, obviously, because, 30 years has gone by or whatever
Yeah.
it is. So the world's not quite the same place. But I think there definitely are things that I saw, first of all, the willingness to rely, and I don't know that this is solely from that venture capital experience, but, the willingness to rely on other people and ask for help and know that I don't know every damn thing. I will say one of the biggest things, like to me, is I constantly am saying to, we do have a few investors, and I've said pretty often, both internally to our staff and to our employees and to our team, and to our investors, like, if I'm not the guy to run this in 3 years, if we decide, Josh, you're not CEO material, then move me the hell out. So that is definitely a lesson of watching founder, CEO, entrepreneurs who don't know when it's time to let go, who they
Yeah.
had a great idea, they knew how to build that MVP, or they knew how to get this thing off the ground, but they don't know anything about scaling a company or whatever those questions are. So there's a level of humility, I hope, that came from watching all of that. Um, there's a level of really understanding how much timing and luck is involved. Um, there's, because I think if I look at things that we invested in the very first GPS company. Um,
Interesting.
we're not wealthy from it because guess
Right.
what? They're not the ones who ended up, actually making all these things work that now drive our phones and our cars and everything
Right.
else, 30 years later. We invested in, I think, one of the first handwriting recognition companies. Again,
Hmm.
30 years too early, but it was cool, right? So,
Yeah.
so understanding that luck and timing and personality, all these things play a part. I mean, there's some little things like I watched companies get in trouble because, of course, when they needed money, the first thing they stopped doing is paying payroll taxes because you could get away with it until you
Oh,
couldn't.
yeah.
And so so I learned a lot of like, I'll say hard legal lessons of like, well, don't ever get caught doing that because officers and directors have personal liability for that kind of shit. Right. So
Yeah.
there's some of those hard lessons, but I think these philosophic lessons were really important to me in watching the people who achieve success, and the people who, couldn't get out of their own ego's way. And that's, I hope, brought, I mean, we're yet to see whether how successful we'll be. I think we're not going to zero anymore.
Yeah.
I think we've got a real company here, but we'll see how much those lessons kind of pay off in the long run.
Well, I think the fact that you've identified that what got you here doesn't necessarily get you there concept of like there are a lot of good people that are amazing at taking a company from 0 to 1, but they're not the person that's going to take them from 1 to 10, and they're
For
probably not the
sure.
person that's going to take them from 10 to 100. Right? There are
Yeah.
people that have the requisite skill set, whether it's at the tip of the spear at the CEO level
Yeah.
or at a sales leadership or marketing leadership, that are really good at their specific areas, but they can get outside of their bubble. I see it all the time, in the private equity world when they get investment. The company was at 1, 2, 3, 5 million in revenue or ARR, and now they brought in a new investor, and they're like, okay, you CMO or you CRO, like you're just not the right person to take
Mm-hmm.
us, and I need to bring somebody in that's done this, right? And
Yeah.
so I think it's interesting that you've identified that you're completely open to birthing this company, birthing this
Yeah.
baby, and then being like, you know what, I'll take care of it for a few years, but if it outgrows me, then
Yeah.
we need to bring
Yeah.
in somebody else that can
Yeah.
take
Or
it to the
find
next
find
level.
the best place for me. Like I kind of hope I'm a pretty good, passionate spokesperson for what we're doing and why we're doing it. So maybe I should be the best evangelist for the company and what we're doing and why we're doing it. But that doesn't mean I know how to go. And you could probably comment on this better than I can. People keep telling me we're about to hit 10 employees,
Mm,
and people keep telling me, oh, 10 is like that's a big change. Like when you get over 10, it's like, and I'm not sure I understand that yet, right? And so maybe I'm going to find out in the next 3 months
yeah.
that I'm not the one who understands how to manage 10 plus people or run a company that has that kind of. So anyway, I totally agree with that. And if I need to move out of the way, let's do it. Because I think again, this goes to doing this at 60, whatever, is interesting to me because it's, again, I'll say, I hope there's a layer of humility in there. I hope that there's a layer of like, I have zero interest in burning this out and going to zero, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if I thought I had a whole career of entrepreneurialism in front of me and entrepreneurship and I was going to go create 5 companies, but this is it. Like, I kind of
Yeah.
look at this and say, this is my last chapter. Like, I have zero interest. If we have something here, let's take care of it. Let's nurture it. Let's build it. Sure. But let's do it really thoughtfully so we don't blow it. And if I'm the one who's
Yeah.
going to blow it, get me the hell out of the way.
Yeah, and hopefully you've got the right investors, because sometimes they don't call the shots, right? So maybe
Yeah.
they're not empowered to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, man, I think we're at that point. We need to bring
Yeah.
somebody else
Yeah.
in." So hopefully the investors are the right level and the right caliber of investor to say, "Hey, we appreciate what you've done. You've
Right.
gotten us to 10, 15, 20 employees, whatever the number is. But we're at the point where, to your point, like maybe you're best at doing this. You're best
Yeah.
at being the
Yeah.
spokesperson, being out talking to people. And we need to bring in a pure operator to then take the business from,
Yeah.
X to Y. So I guess I'm curious a little bit about kind of the next phase, right? So obviously you're almost at 10 employees. What is the next step? So if we jumped on a podcast a year from now, what do you think would be the right, what would be successful for you or success to you over the next 12 months? If you came back and said, "Hey, we did these, 2 or 3
Yeah.
things."
Yeah. So I think there's certainly platform developments, right, that go along with that and just what our roadmap looks like. And I'm super excited, especially if we really limited that to 12 months as opposed to maybe 3 to 5 years kind of thing. So I'm really excited about where the platform itself is going and where the roadmap's going. Um, I'm excited. We basically have kind of a B2C channel and a B2B channel. And I feel like we have a pretty dialed in understanding of that B2C channel. And that, again, that could be anybody from you and me to $1 billion family office, but that's all sort of that B2C channel. Um, we're not there yet on the B2B side. Like we're really still learning what does it mean to go sell into a wealth management firm or an accounting firm or a law firm or uh, a multifamily office or a trust company or any of these kind of people who would see the value in what we're doing. So a year from now, I hope we have that dialed in the way that I feel like we have it dialed in on the B2C side. And really, I mean, this is maybe not totally measurable and maybe a little bit too audacious given where we are. But, in going back to your comments about the wealth management industry, and I don't know if listeners will know what I mean when I say this, but like if you talk about Adipar in the wealth management industry, everybody knows who Adipar is. I want that to be Leaf Planner. I want Leaf Plan. I want everybody in this industry, however you want to define that industry, to know who Leaf Planner is and what it's all about and why. They may use it, they may not use it. There may be someday like right now, I don't think we even have any competitors, but there may be a competitor out there. But I want people to know who we are.
Yeah. No, I mean that's definitely. You definitely can measure that in the sense of just your traction in getting new customers, right? I think that's a measurable thing. About the kind of platform enhancements and as you think about it, AI. We talked a little bit about it earlier. Like AI is kind of on the tip of everybody's tongue, and everybody's trying to create an AI business. And VC is pumping tons of money into this space, knowing that somebody's going to win. It just depends on who, and can we bet on the right horse and all of that. Yeah. So, I talked to a lot of private equity and VC groups, and the biggest concern everybody has is just data privacy, right? And who's training on your data? Are they actually training on your data? Even if you pay for it and turn off, don't train on my data. I've always used the rule of thumb of don't put anything out there that you wouldn't, push out in an email to somebody, right? So you don't want to put very sensitive information in there. But I guess as you think about it in this space, in the financial planning and wealth management space, it's very compliance driven, right? There's a lot of things you can and can't say or can and can't do, which obviously very well about being on the legal side of it.
Yeah.
Where do you see AI generally going in this space? And then what about some applications? You've already hinted on a few of them, but what do you think are some potential AI integrations or enhancements to your platform that could help provide better support, especially as these multi-generational families, the young ones are growing up in a digital first world with AI, right? So they're not going to want to call the lawyer and ask them questions. Right. They're going to want to go to Chat GPT / Leaf Planner and get the answer that they need. So that was a very long-winded question around AI.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. And first of all, here's the downside to being 62 years old. Like I don't have the answer to any of that. I would say within the platform, the things that, and I'm not a tech person, so I'll say like, I think I keep up pretty well. And I kind of have an understanding of what some of this stuff is and all that kind of stuff. So I think the low hanging fruit for us, for example, is document ingestion and comprehension in a way that, again, as you're saying, right, it's got to be walled off. It can't be, nobody can be learning on our models. Nobody can be grabbing a trust agreement that we put into Leaf Planner for analysis and all of a sudden that's out on the web, right? I mean, that's got to be protected. Yep. And I think I'm really excited about it. I think there's a real opportunity. We're talking about how this would obviously come into being, that your Leaf Plan is its own large language model and you're going to query it. So when you talk about that child who says, I'm not calling the estate lawyer. First of all, nobody wants to call their estate lawyer at $1,500 an hour anymore anyway. So, now the good news is hopefully you could query your Leaf Plan and say, give me some of these answers. And so we would essentially have that Leaf Plan act as its own LLM. But again, got to be careful of what's the data that's self-contained within obviously that Leaf Plan, and that it's not learning off of other things and things like that. Right. There was something else I was just thinking of as you said that, and I'm struggling with what it was.
Well, I do some angel investing, and we invested in a company that kind of helps companies build their their large language model or small language model, kind of how they describe it. So it's kind of fascinating. I feel like a lot of companies that I look at and talk to, they're starting to invest in their own data sets versus,
Mm.
leveraging Chat GPT.
Mm-hmm.
It reduces a lot of the hallucinations that you get sometimes
Yeah.
with Chat
Yeah.
GPT. And obviously if great data in is going to provide great data out. And I'm definitely not an AI expert by any means. So, take what I say with a little bit of a grain of salt. There are a lot of good experts out there, but I think
Yeah.
that could be an interesting dynamic for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of small businesses that are trying to work with very sensitive data, is creating your own walled off language
Right.
model so
Right.
that, if it is queried, it's not going to, put out sensitive information,
Yeah.
essentially, at least
Yeah.
not as easily. So,
Yeah. And by the way, I remember the thing I was going to say because the way you said that. There's a company we talked to. So I don't know that it's really similar, but Steven Spielberg did this whole project. Oh my God, I'm spacing on the name, but where they interviewed basically every Holocaust survivor.
okay.
And there's a company that we did talk to, and I'm sure more than one company is out there working on this, but because Leaf Planner is so legacy driven, right? It's really not just about, I mean, yes, information is at the center of it, but it's also about how do you preserve family legacies and avoid family fights and kind of all this other stuff. So one of the things we've talked about, or talked to this other company about, because we wouldn't build it, we would want somebody else to be, doing that, is, where's the possibility to basically say, hey, we're going to do hours and hours and hours of interviews with mom and dad or the grandparents or whoever the hell it is. And that's going to all be stored there in an AI accessible way so that, future generations could actually have a conversation with those ancestors. And that, if we could pull something like that off with somebody who actually knows how to do it, right? And that becomes a thing, like that's a really interesting to me component of how do you see Leaf Planner as, again, bringing together not just this holistic picture of information, but really driving the conversation around family legacy. And I think that'd be
Yeah,
really
there.
cool.
My grandfather, I didn't know him super well. He passed away when I was super young, but he set my grandmother up some way. I don't know how much money he made in his life, but she never worked a day in her life, and lived a pretty awesome life, and died at like 94, 95. And so to your point, I would love to be able to have a chat with him.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
talking to AI may be a little bit odd for me, but maybe the younger generations are completely fine with it.
Right.
Interacting with an AI kind of model that is built off of your
Yeah.
grandfather or great grandfather or whatever. But I think just having some of those stories that, if you would have interviewed my grandfather when he was, when he was older, and
Mm-hmm.
I was young, it'd be really cool to be able to go back and at the very least listen to them, and maybe
Yeah.
query them to understand, like, you maybe have asked a bunch of questions and I could query the question. So maybe it's not AI generated, it's actually him talking. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, that's more personal for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's amazing. I think that could be a really interesting way to almost keep family photos, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You keep these family memories, but
Yeah.
they're queryable and you can ask them questions, which is kind of crazy that we're talking about that stuff. But
Crazy that we're talking about that.
yeah.
Really crazy.
But Josh, I really appreciate this. And I guess, if, somebody's out there listening to this, and maybe they're 25 or 65 or anywhere in between, and they have an idea that they've maybe been thinking about for a minute or 10 years, and they may be similar to you, where you didn't have that kind of burning fire, like, let's go start, run through brick walls and start this business. But they have like a spouse or a friend or a partner or whatever that's like, you should really like try it, at least try it. Like, what are maybe some advice or tips you would kind of give to that person to kind of help maybe get them over the edge to at least kind of dip their toe in the entrepreneurial waters, so to speak?
Yeah. Man, it's a good question, Justin, because I'm going to say I'm a terrible person in some way to ask that question. Because the lawyer in me and my own experience is like, don't do it. So I think, surround yourself with really smart people. Um, Understand the risk you're taking, right? I mean, most businesses do not succeed. So we all know that. I mean, the statistics are easy enough, even without ChatGPT, to look up and figure out how many businesses actually make it, let alone make it big. I think, people these days, and look, this has always been true in one iteration or another, think that they're going to start the next Amazon or then, back in the dot-com bubble when I was growing into this. And so it's all one iteration or another of this whole thing. But I would say, you got believe in yourself, right? Understand your limitations. That to me is like a really big thing. That goes back to my whole comment of I'm not necessarily the long-term CEO of this.
Yep.
I would say, really do your due diligence. I mean, that seems like it should go without saying, but I see so many founder stories of, I did this because, and frankly, I'm one of those stories, right? I did Leaf Planner because, and too many of those stories are because I couldn't find it elsewhere. And believe me, I can go on Google and find 15 of you. So,
Yeah.
I promise you can't go on Google and find 15 Leaf Planners. So it's, do your due diligence, make sure that it's something that is it needed, right? I mean, there's this other idea that people I think go out and do things that sound cool and they are cool, but is anybody going to pay money for it and turn this into a thing? But believe in yourself and go try it. And especially look, if you're young and you have the flexibility to do that, then by all means go do it. And then if it doesn't work, honestly, I mean, venture capitalists are big boys and family offices are big boys, and they understand what they're investing in. And I mean, as long as they're not defrauded, then
Right.
you understand that people lose money and sometimes it doesn't work and start again.
Yeah.
I don't
No,
know.
it makes a ton of sense. And Josh, I really appreciate you sharing your story, and
Thank
we
you.
could kind of go 4 or 5 layers deeper in some of this stuff, but I'm respectful of time and everything. But I want to end this with a 3-pack of questions that I ask every guest. So
Okay.
first question is maybe share an influential book, and I've also opened it up to podcasts because I feel like we're on a podcast, so why
Oh,
not open
that's
it up?
fair.
So but if you want to say a book, great. But an influential business book or just general book in general that you would recommend.
Yeah. So I'll say influential. And it's interesting because at different stages of my life, it's become more and more influential for different reasons. So there's a book called Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. And Ken Follett, when I was growing up, was I'm going to say like a World War II kind of mystery nonfiction writer, and I'm sorry, fiction writer. And then all of a sudden he comes out with this book called Pillars of the Earth, which for anybody who's read it is, this wild story about building cathedrals in medieval times and the centuries that it took to build these and going from generation to generation while these things were still under construction. And leaving aside how beautifully told it is and that he shifted, and I don't know anything about him, but that he shifted from, kind of these World War II, fiction stories to this almost nonfiction esque story about generations building these cathedrals. It's beautifully written. I think it's just such a huge leap in his writing. And then for me, looking back on it now and the work that I do in kind of multi-generational families and understanding that these are things that get planted and seeded and worked on for generations, there's like a whole nother layer of meaning to it now, kind of for me.
They're building the financial.
Since you open it up to podcasts, I know I'm not supposed to do two things, but
No, you're fine.
because I said that comment to me is so important. I'm sure you know the podcast How I Built This, and
Yep.
what I love is that he ends every interview with how much of this was skill and how much of this was luck. And I love that because I love hearing the CEOs or entrepreneurs who are willing to admit it. You were in the right place. You were at the right time. There's an element of luck to everything we did. Hell, being born in the United States and being able to
Yep.
do the things. Not sure that's my favorite thing right this minute, but that's neither here nor there. But
That's another podcast.
that's another podcast. But it's
Yeah.
I mean, the luck involved in these things is really tremendous.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And
So there's
I
question one.
listened to a
Sorry.
number of episodes of How I Built This. So
Love
definitely
that.
recommend that.
Love them.
All right. Second question here is what is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
Most of my life, I would have said golf and skiing and running. Now I would honestly say, and this is going to be corny as hell, pretty much anything that I can do with my kids and my dogs. And I'm going to feel like I left my wife out of that, and I don't mean to, but my kids and my dogs and my wife, if she wants to come along.
Got it. Got it. Well, hopefully she doesn't listen to this episode. You've already
She
hidden
won't.
millions of dollars of gold, and now
Exactly.
awesome. All right, favorite vacation spot. I know you've got this vacation group or plan or something at your own. So maybe it seems like you've traveled a lot. So what's your vacation?
I love traveling, but I would say if I had to pick a favorite and like I had to land there for a really long time, it's going to be a beach. And right this minute, I would say it's the Abaco Island in the Bahamas. It just is this secluded, beautiful beach, and I could be happy there for a long time.
Got it. I'll have to check that out. I have not heard of that island, so very cool. Josh, man, this has been awesome to get to know about you and your multiple careers and your journey to launching Leaf Planner. If people want to reach out and learn more about you, learn more about Leaf Planner, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so our website's leafplanner.com. I'm at josh@leafplanner.com. As you can tell, I love talking about this stuff. So if anybody has questions, love BSing about family dynamics and multi-generational wealth and any of these kind of things. So anybody's welcome to reach out anytime.
Awesome. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes. Josh, man, really nice to meet you. And thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.